Hey people, this video has a lot of reasons to exist. A, I need to get these opinions out into the world or else I'll fucking explode! B, I haven't really seen anyone give proper criticism on Danny's World as a game. And C, it's not mentally healthy for me to think about this game anymore, so I might as well get it out of my system while I still can. So, Danny's World. You know it, you love it, or despise it with all of your being. For those of you that don't know, Danny's World is a stealth-survival roguelike made in the Roblox game engine. It's kind of infamous for having a pretty weird fandom of exclusively 12-year-olds and adults who have way too much free time. For me, however, this game is stuck in my brain purely because the gameplay is flawed on a fundamental level, and the fans just keep eating it up for no reason. If you dig into the game from a game design perspective, you will find out how little thought was put into every single aspect of the game. It is insane. Enough with the intro, let's just take a deep dive into Danny's World and see what we can learn about game design and shit. I'm probably going to have to explain the gameplay loop now, since most well-adjusted adults have better things to do than play Roblox all day. So this game is a floor-based roguelike, kind of like a mix of The Binding of Isaac and Repo with its formatting. You team up with up to 8 people and go through each floor completing generators. What makes this game different from its predecessors is the class mechanic, which affects a lot of the gameplay. We'll touch on this more later, hint hint wink wink. The Twisteds are another major factor you need to deal with, being enemies that you have to avoid, in theory at least, in order to survive. That's about it for the core loop. I'll touch on more specific aspects later, but for now this will probably be enough. On a side note, if you're one of those people that just says minus elevation better or depth spelunking better under every video related to Danny's World, I have bad news. Those games fucking suck ass too. They're actually arguably worse than Danny's World. I have basically only found one Delver Lake that's good, and that's Flop World. Flop World's peak. And by peak, I mean it's A tier at best. Yeah, this isn't a very good genre. It could definitely be better, but nobody is making any good games in it. Besides me. Hi, this is my plug for OCC.
Problem 1. Distracting.
We're going to start out with the biggest issue with this game, that being distracting. So characters each have a spread of 5 stats: skill check, stamina, speed, stealth, and extraction speed. Each character gets 15, or 16, stat points to put into these stats. You would naturally think that 3 in all stats would be the most versatile character could be, but like, you're wrong. It is objectively better to have high speed than any other stat. You want to know why? Here's a clip of a character running around from enemies at 1-star speed. You can see they're struggling a little bit with the stamina. Now here's a clip of a character running with 5-star speed. Yeah, they aren't using any stamina because you can just walk. Since you can do this, it'd be a logical conclusion that you could permanently loop enemies in a corner of the map while everyone else just does machines and progresses the floor. This in turn makes everyone who isn't distracting enemies they just don't have to deal with enemies. They just sit in a corner and press space for the entire floor until the distractor dies. You can probably see what the issue is here. Even worse, since distracting was discovered, the devs have used it as essentially just a replacement for any sort of difference in character playstyle. Without it, individual tunes would feel more like Dead by Daylight perks than actual individual classes. This is an example of developers leaving in cheese strats, taking it to its logical extreme. Distracting actively makes the game less fun, yet the devs leave it in because they can't be bothered to actually balance a mechanic.
Problem 2. Reliance on progression.
Danny's World's entire gameplay loop relies on progression, since without it, the game would be much less addicting for the 12-year-olds. The progression system is essentially just grinding Icar by playing the game and grinding research. Research being the worst of the two, due to it being based on which random enemies spawn, leaving a lot of unlocks up to complete RNG on how long they'll take. What's worse is that some characters are locked behind mastering other characters. For Blot, You have to do a whole tree of mastery, getting the mastery for Poppy, Louie, and Yada in that order before even being able to think about buying him. You have to play as objectively one of the worst characters in the entire game to unlock V. This isn't even mentioning the fact that most of the characters are complete dog water to play, because balancing isn't a thing the devs tried to do. It literally took me 6 months to unlock Sprout simply because I didn't want to do a 2-hour, 20-floor run every single day. The progression system seems to take priority instead of the gameplay loop, being needlessly complex in order to keep players always trying to get the next set of unlocks. What's even worse is when you run out of things to grind for, you just can't do anything. The gameplay is entirely designed around grinding, and you just have to wait for the next update to be able to, actually have any sort of goal. This is an example of a phenomenon with games as of recently I like to call progression slop, where a game entirely relies on progression to motivate the player. This leads to games that get stale quickly and progressively feel less and less rewarding.
Problem 3. Too much variety. Too little depth.
I've seen a lot of people complain that Danny's World needs more variety, and I honestly couldn't agree less. There are 40 different tunes, but it still doesn't feel like enough variety simply because the tunes lack any sort of depth. Let's take a look at 3 tunes from the Distractor class. Pebble, Goob, and Gordy. How do these characters play differently? Gordy can press F sometimes to give people a boost and potentially save them. Pebble can press F to save people by aggroing Twisteds, and Goob can press F to grab people. How are these tunes played outside of this? They could all run around in a circle distracting, or they could sit still and extract. That's basically 2 things each that just barely differentiate them. In practice, however, Goob and Gordy both don't even use their abilities when distracting, which basically just makes it 1.5 differences per character. This is what I'm talking about. 1 to 2 abilities per character doesn't really work most of the time, and just leads to them feeling like Dead by Daylight perks more than anything. Really, the stats actually determine more about the character's playstyle than their abilities, which is just fucking bogus. Ah! Let's look at an actually good example of class variety in the game Team Fortress 2. That's right, this was secretly a Susky Jesus video! I'll compare another 3 classes from the Defense class, which I think is most analogous to the Distractor class, ignoring how badly designed it is. The Heavy has a machine gun as his main weapon, which is the most powerful mid-range primary weapon in the entire game, as well as a shotgun used to finish people off or defend himself when he can't use the minigun, with his main weakness being slow speed and rev time, giving him a distinct playstyle as a slow tank that could hold his ground and block enemy forces. Demoman has 2 types of explosive that can detonate after firing, or wait until a button is pressed to detonate when the time is right, with the sticky bombs actually being able to be charged to shoot further, this all combining to create a semi-trapper playstyle with the ability to deal with lots of people at once. The Engineer has scrap metal, which he can use to build a sentry, dispenser, and teleporters, being also able to upgrade each machine alongside a shotgun and pistol as secondaries, creating a playstyle centered around managing your machine upgrades and health, and fortifying your base. Notice the word playstyle being used. Dandy's World doesn't give characters distinct playstyles, because the system with mains and all that shit simply doesn't have the flexibility to allow any to shine through. Heck, the character with the most depth is Cosmo, who is literally just a healer who uses their health to heal. We also should compare how characters can synergize in each game. In Dandy's World, there's 3 character-specific synergies of Sprout/Cosmo, Ginger/Cosmo, and Coco/Bassie. That last one not even being a good synergy since Bassie could just carry better items than bonbons. In TF2, there's actually too many specific character synergies to actually mention. Almost every character can actually synergize with each other. Medic can ubercharge attackers to make them the most powerful units in the entire game. Engineer can help Heavy with their speed weakness using teleporters. Pyros work great at defending sentry nests. The depth of each character's playstyle allows each of them to help the team, even if they aren't directly next to everyone else.
Problem 4. Lack of playtesting.
Have you ever played Danny's World when an update drops? It's literally hell. Half the mechanics don't work, the Twisteds somehow break. Heck, one time, they literally forgot to make one of the Twisteds chase you. This all shows the devs do barely any playtesting on their own to check if the game is playable or fun. They just outsource it to the community instead. This can be seen with Goob, who on launch was able to kill people by pulling them out of the elevator. Any normal, sane developer would immediately think of this, or like see it in testing and go, hey, maybe we should fix this actually. But the Danny's World devs just didn't care enough to even check or try if that was something you could do with a character who can pull people, aka the most easy thing to use to grief in a game. By far the most egregious example is what the devs have done to solo running. They have actively fucked over solo runs since the game started, to the point where the game is 500 times more difficult without a second player distracting. They made it even worse recently by increasing the twisted cap to 8, just because distractors were saying the game was boring and too easy. They also made it so that low-speed, high-distraction characters are even worse at solo runs because they made machines that take longer if your speed is low. Okay, I'm moving on. This is pissing me off too much.
Problem 5. Roblox and criticism.
Let's face it, once your game becomes popular enough, you're basically immune from all criticism. Just look at Minecraft. Any form of criticism thrown their way falls on deaf ears, yet people still play because, actually, that's mostly because of mods and being able to roll back to earlier versions, but my point still stands. This is an issue with a lot of Roblox games, where the developers just kind of give up at a certain point and just add whatever, while the criticism from the fan base is just ignored or just doesn't even exist. Take a look at Forsaken. They have gotten into the habit of just adding whatever without a care for balance or class design, yet people still play because... Wait, oh, I'm putting the blame on 12-year-olds again, fuck. At this point, I can't really blame literal children for not being able to criticize the media they consume. Like, their prefrontal cortex is barely developed and they can't even drive a car. Do I really expect them to be able to think logically about why the game they're playing is bad? No, that's too much pressure to put on a random child. The blame is entirely on the developers for not trying at all to make a good game. They're on the same level as any gacha game you can find on the Play Store, with very similar practices, like locking essential parts of the game. Heck, literally, Quell is a fan of Cookie Run. You can't be a good game developer and be a fan of Cookie Run at the same time. Honestly, I'm fucking done here. I need to wrap up before I go insane again. Hey,
How to fix Dandy's World. Yeah.
There's not a lot of ways to save this game at this point. Its entire backbone is built upon an entirely broken foundation, and there are a few things that could be done that wouldn't upset the fans. I may as well point out what could potentially be done, but it likely won't happen because the devs are too fucking stupid. Removing permanent looping is probably the first step, since it is the driving force behind why the classes have so little depth. As someone who has worked with the speed stat in a game similar to Danny's World, hinted wink wink, this will likely take months of balancing out how it works due to the stat just being pure slop. But it will also just be worth it. Also, the dial mechanic should not be added to every twisted, as that would just be plain unfun. I've seen so many people suggest that. That is not...
Ready for a rematch?
Half the cast just needs to be removed. Most of the characters add literally nothing to the game, and it would just be better without them. Furthermore, characters should not require grinding for hours to get them, or mastering a separate character, as that just detracts from the gameplay entirely. The entire cast should also be reworked to have 2 abilities at the very least, with the whole thing with mains getting an extra ability being removed, so each character can instead just have however many abilities they need to feel complete. Characters should also each have a distinct playstyle, so people have a reason to play them outside of just being the first character you get. Look at Poppy and Boxen, nobody fucking plays them. Machines should be more spread out and take less time, so that more time could just be spent running around the floor and exploring. Because that's like the most fun part of gameplay, right? And that's about it. I got nothing else, I'm dandied out now. Thank God I quit Roblox. I won't have to look at that fucker, his maker, ever again.
What if we took a skeleton and made her a